Somewhere in your kitchen right now, something is calling to you. Maybe it's a bag of chips in the pantry. Maybe it's the last slice of cake you swore you wouldn't touch. Salt, sugar, fat, in some combination. It's probably already on your mind. And here's the part worth sitting with. You didn't consciously choose to want it. That's not a metaphor. Something in your brain lit up before you decided anything. If you fought it off, you likely had to talk yourself out of it, actively. Like arguing with a second person living in your skull. This isn't a modern glitch. It's not a character flaw. And it's definitely not new. It's ancient, older than agriculture, older than cooking, quite possibly older than the fully modern mind currently feeling guilty about a candy bar. It was already wired into a brain that evolved in a world where salt, sugar, and fat were almost impossible to find. So here's the real question. Not why do I want this snack, but why a craving built for scarcity is still running the show in a world of abundance. When did it get installed, and why has it never once been uninstalled? To answer that, we need to go back to a world with none of it lying around. Picture East Africa, close to 2 million years ago. Early members of our genus, Homo, are scavenging carcasses left behind by bigger predators. There's meat, but it's lean meat, all muscle, almost no fat. That sounds like a win. It isn't. Archaeologist John Speth has spent decades studying what happens to people who eat lean meat and nothing else. The condition has a name: rabbit starvation. Eat only lean protein for long enough, and your body can't process it. You get sick. You can starve on a completely full stomach. So early humans didn't just want fat, they needed it to survive eating meat at all. At sites like Olduvai Gorge, archaeologists have found animal bones smashed open with stone tools. Not for the meat still clinging to them, but for the marrow packed inside. That marrow was almost pure fat, worth more calories per bite than anything else on the savanna. Think about that. Before fire, before agriculture, before permanent shelter, we were already cracking bones open specifically to chase fat. And it wasn't subtle. Marrow cracking leaves a very particular kind of damage: percussion marks, shattered bone ends that don't happen by accident. Researchers can still read that damage nearly 2 million years later and tell that somebody sat down with a rock and worked for it. That's craving number one, at least 1.8 million years old, older than language, older, by some estimates, than fire itself. Now hold that thought, because sugar has its own origin story, and it starts with an insect willing to sting you for it. Wild fruit is seasonal and unreliable, but there's one concentrated sugar source that keeps showing up in the archaeological record: honey. In a limestone shelter in eastern Spain called Cuevas de la Araña, there's rock art estimated at roughly 8,000 years old. It shows a human figure climbing on vines, reaching directly into a wild beehive, surrounded by swarming bees. That's not decoration, that's a documented risk calculation. Get stung repeatedly or don't get the sugar. People chose the stings every single time. Basically, the Paleolithic version of standing in line for extra syrup and deciding, yeah, it's worth it. Here's what makes this so important. This isn't one culture being oddly obsessed with sweets. Modern hunter-gatherer groups, like the Hadza in Tanzania, still rank honey as one of their most prized foods today. Sometimes the single most calorie-dense thing they'll eat all year. Same craving. Completely different continents. Tens of thousands of years apart. That's not coincidence. That's programming. Now salt. And salt plays by different rules entirely. Unlike sugar and fat, salt isn't optional. Nerves, muscles, fluid balance. Your body genuinely cannot function without sodium. And for most of human history, it was nowhere near as easy to get as standing next to a shaker on your table. At Lake Yuncheng, in modern-day Shaanxi, China, people were extracting salt from mineral-rich water at least 6,000 years ago, one of the oldest salt production sites ever documented. Entire communities organized their labor around evaporating water down to crystals. Not a seasoning, a survival resource. Mined like ore. Once salt became valuable, people built economies on top of it. Roman soldiers reportedly received a salt allowance as part of their pay, a salarium. Say that word out loud. It's where we get salary. Let that sit for a second. The word for your paycheck may trace back to a craving your body still has today. And salt's grip on history didn't end with Rome. Fast forward to 1930. In colonial India, the British government held a legal monopoly on salt production and taxed it heavily, even though the ocean produces it for free along the coastline. Mahatma Gandhi organized a 240-mile march to the sea at Dandi specifically to make salt illegally, by hand, from seawater as an act of defiance. A basic seasoning became the flashpoint for a movement that helped end an empire's grip on a subcontinent. Here's what makes this so important. We're not talking about a niche craving. Salt has shaped diets, paychecks, taxes, and revolutions because the body's need for it never once went away, no matter how advanced the civilization sitting on top of it became. But here's the thing, sugar wasn't finished evolving either. Around 350 CE, in the Gupta Empire in India, people figured out how to boil sugarcane juice down into solid crystals. Not just sweet liquid anymore, a storable, tradable, concentrated form of pure sugar. The technique spread west, through Persia, through the Islamic world, eventually into Europe, where sugar became a luxury good worth fighting empires over. We went from risking bee stings for a mouthful of honey to building entire colonial trade networks around crystallized cane sugar. Same craving, wildly different scale, which brings us to now, and to the part of this story that should genuinely unsettle you a little. In the 20th century, food scientists, including a researcher named Howard Moskowitz, working for the processed food industry, started deliberately engineering products to hit what he called the bliss point, the exact ratio of salt, sugar, and fat that maximizes craving without ever fully satisfying it. Journalist Michael Moss documented this in detail. Entire labs dedicated to reverse engineering the same instinct that once sent a Paleolithic human up a vine after a beehive. The difference is, that person had to fight actual bees for it. You just have to open a bag. So here's the full picture. It starts with cracked bones on the savanna. Nearly 2 million years ago, humans chasing fat just to survive eating meat. It becomes a person climbing into a beehive in Spain 8,000 years ago, risking real pain for a mouthful of sugar. It becomes entire communities in ancient China boiling water down to salt crystals, and Roman soldiers getting paid in the stuff. It becomes a march to the sea in 1930, where making your own salt was treated as an act of rebellion against an empire. It becomes an empire in India, learning to crystallize sugarcane, kicking off trade routes that reshaped the world. And it becomes, in our lifetime, laboratories engineering the exact bliss point of salt, sugar, and fat to keep you reaching for more. So the next time you're standing in front of the fridge at 11 at night, craving something salty or sweet or fried, that's not weakness. That's a 2 million-year-old survival instinct, built for a world of scarcity, now living inside a world of infinite snacks. We spent nearly all of human history trying to get enough of this stuff. We've only spent the last 100 years or so figuring out how to get too much. Maybe that's the real twist of being human. The same hunger that kept our ancestors alive is the one we now have to learn to manage. If you liked digging into this one, there's a lot more of our weird, ancient habits to get through. Stick around for the next one.